the goals of Spy Movie Rewind is to track the progress of the spy genre, discussing the presentation of new themes, evolving historical context, and the building of the genre's archetypes. North by Northwest helped us understand the psychological aspect of spying. Before we get into more tentpole spy films, we need to look at the closest genre relative of the spy at this point in time, the war film. Both war and spy films share similar themes, and there have often been war-spy hybrid films whose themes highlight the similarities between the soldier and the spy. For example, national loyalty. The duty of the soldier and the duty of the spy are often placed in question while making arguments about how patriotism conflicts with morality. More often than not, both spy films and war films end on a pessimistic note that says what's being done is required despite not being ideal. Spies and soldiers often present themselves as tools for a system, and character arcs revolve around forging an identity independent of their superiors or accepting their equipmentality for the greater good. For that reason, both spy and war films have an underlying sense of jingoism that's difficult to avoid. That particular flaw is something we can study along more historical and cultural lines after we've reviewed more films. Before getting into what many people consider to be a typical spy film, let's take a look at what are considered core spy themes in the classic war epic, The Guns of Navarone. Additionally, the making of this video marks the 55th anniversary of this film, so we'll spend a little bit of extra time on its history. The Guns of Navarone was released in 1961, after the success of 1960's The Magnificent Seven. The idea of a group coming together like this was never very popular in Western film until The Magnificent Seven cast some of the most popular actors of its time and presented a similar story that recontextualized similar tropes and plot elements from Seven Samurai. The Guns of Navarone was one of the first global productions, meaning that it had a cast assembled from a variety of countries in order to have the widest possible appeal at the international box office. The idea for this film, like The Magnificent Seven before it, was to focus on a team of specialists, each of whom brings their personal skill to a dangerous mission. This idea later spawned more military films with a similar premise. It would also later inspire the Mission Impossible franchise. The film itself is a spy piece in that the team we focus on is going on a covert mission, and Gregory Peck's lead character is considered a spy. However, the war elements bleed into that premise, and as we analyze the themes of this piece, we'll see Peck's character as the foundation for something we will later associate with classic spies. The film was written by Carl Foreman, who, after writing High Noon, fell victim to the blacklist for refusing to name names at the House Un-American Activities Committee. He wasn't able to work in the US again, so he relocated to England, where he worked using pseudonyms and covers. There he wrote the Oscar-winning film The Bridge on the River Kwai, but credited the novel's author. In 1958, Foreman set up his own production company, One Road Films, and started using his name again. He used the Guns of Navarone's international nature to help relaunch his career. However, this was an expensive film. Its initial budget of $2 million bubbled to $6 million. To increase the film's box office appeal, Foreman wrote 2 female resistance fighters into the script. To score the film, Foreman hired Dmitry Tomakin, the Russian-born composer who won an Oscar for High Noon, and paid him an unprecedented $50,000. This is where the trouble starts. Foreman hired Alexander Makendrick to direct the film, who previously did The Man in the White Suit and The Lady Killers. He and Foreman had an argument a week before filming started, leading to his firing. A second director was hired and tossed before Foreman finally settled on J. Lee Thompson with Gregory Peck's approval. Interestingly, many of the film's stars had some military experience. Thompson got the directing job partly because of his service with the Royal Air Force in World War II. Similarly, Anthony Quayle helped organize guerrilla fighters in Albania, and David Niven's character is a member of the Light Infantry, the same regiment the actor served with.
You weren't a very good soldier, you say?
I was very, very bad indeed. And they had a system then in the regular army when you had to have a confidential report, which the colonel wrote, and then you were formed up and marched in, and it was read to you once a year before he sent it to the War Office. And if you agreed, you signed it. Well, of course, you had to agree, so you signed it anyway. And I was formed up, and it said, this officer, though in a few respects excellent, after 2 years in Malta, knows less about the army than most of his friends in the Navy. So I signed it. It was right. I said, very generous. I thank you very much. Not a good beginning.
When you have a film with this many stars, personality conflicts are inevitable. For example, Anthony Quinn insisted on wearing a red undershirt beneath his costume. When the costume got wet, which happened frequently, the undershirt stood out. Gregory Peck would later say that Quinn did this to steal focus. Anthony Quayle thought Anthony Quinn was difficult to work with, and David Niven was afraid he was being upstaged by other cast members, particularly Gregory Peck. Anthony Quinn brought several portable chess sets which made chess the off-screen pastime and helped to diffuse rivalries between the stars. Peck felt that the story was basically preposterous and required a major suspension of disbelief on the part of the audience. Those commandos were performing miracles, 5 or 6 commandos outwitting a whole German regiment, getting right into the middle of them, stealing their uniforms and masquerading as Nazis. Well, to do that, you have to do with the Nazis what Max Sennett did to the Keystone Cops. There were 550 chances for them to kill us before we even set foot on the island, but we had to do it with total conviction, even though we were aware that it was flirting with parody. During filming, Peck suggested many rewrites to Foreman, which mostly found their way into the final cut of the film. Because of the star's advanced ages, the British press dubbed the Guns of Navarone "Elderly Gang Goes Off to War." And because of his ability to get the international cast to work together, director J. Lee Thompson was nicknamed Mighty Mouse on set. Here comes the good news. During production, Peck and David Niven became close friends over Peck's ability to drink massive amounts of brandy, which the actors used to stay warm. Their families visited each other frequently, and Peck would deliver the eulogy at Niven's funeral. $6 million later, and the film had a $13 million domestic box office, became the second highest grossing film of 1961, and earned 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Its success resulted in more adaptations of Alistair MacLean's work, namely Where Eagles Dare, which we'll cover down the line. A war epic like this, especially one made during the Cold War that's reliving what many thought were the glory days of World War II, can very easily come off as immature. The ballooning budget and farce-like quality of the events can turn into a nonsensical mess that make no statement about war and seemingly celebrate mass casualties for the sake of spectacle. However, this is not the case. One of the most distinct elements of the Guns of Navarone is its powerful anti-war message, which will be the crux of this analysis. At 158 minutes, thousands of Greek extras, and on-location shooting, The Guns of Navarone is truly an epic. The film builds rather slowly, opening with a review of the events of the war thus far, and then introducing Gregory Peck's Captain Mallory as he receives his mission. The island of Navarone houses 2 massive guns that the Axis powers are using to wipe out the soldiers on the island of Keros. Mallory's mission is to take a group of cutthroats, ex-soldiers, and specialists to Navarone, climb a mountain in the middle of the night, break into an invincible German fortress, and destroy the superguns in less than a week. As Peck said, the premise is fairly ridiculous. However, given the nature of Hollywood epics, it's not completely unbelievable. The film is set in Greece, and the opening monologue describes it as a land of myth and demigods. It draws a contrast between the soldier and the classic Greek hero. Given the tone and events of the piece, the film is very much a heightened reality. Each soldier is given some distinct trait, a very specific fixation that comes more to the forefront as these men get closer to their nearly impossible mission. The film isn't about idealizing war or even empowering soldiers. It's about the people trapped in conflict and human nature guiding them through it. The events of the film serve the themes and characters, fitting into the nature of melodrama. Going through every single character won't be necessary. Most of them have close connections to each other, like Stavros' desire to kill Mallory over the death of his family, while others are mouthpieces for the overall theme of the film, such as David Niven's Corporal Miller, who hates the very idea of war. The film focuses on the details of war, what it does to a person's senses and morality, while trying to highlight the immorality of war in general, regardless of outcome. Throughout the film, the team feels trapped in their uniforms. Miller is most vocal about this when he pushes Captain Mallory to act out the atrocities he's ordering other people to commit in order for Mallory to see the error of his ways. No one in the film is innocent, and at no point does the film act like the Allies are good people. Even some of the Nazi characters are given more dimension than the simplistic view other films perpetuated of them being pure evil.
We're going to leave Major Franklin behind. He's a wounded officer. I expect him to get proper medical attention.
We don't make war on wounded men.
The idea comes down to people taking orders not because they believe in them, but because they really have no other choice. Their life becomes a trap with a predictable pattern. Learn your mission, complete your mission, celebrate before getting the next mission. Ultimately, none of these people are complete patriots. They serve a cause that they have no real say in. When the team finally arrives on Navarone, Maria says that the power of the superguns has weakened the foundation of the nearby homes, forcing the people to evacuate, symbolic of what war does to each of them and the collateral damage that no one can fix. Mallory even has a moment where he asks if what he's doing is civilized. Yes, it's necessary to win the strategically important battle of the war, but how can these actions, these cruelties, be the way enlightened people conduct themselves? Now, there is a philosophical element here that parallels the team's character arcs. Germany was both the central hub of Enlightenment philosophy and the birthplace of fascism through Nazis. The Frankfurt School of Critical Theory spent its time trying to decide how we so-called civilized people could even turn into warmongers generating so much death. Thinkers like Adorno, Horkheimer, Benjamin, and more contributed to the study of post-Enlightenment fascism, as well as what it meant to be enlightened or civilized in the first place. We won't get into any more detail on this particular philosophical inquiry, but it is worth mentioning because the attitudes of the soldiers of this film are not generated by post-war reflection on the part of the writer. It was a question that was being addressed during the war and is so inherent to the story. This all boils down to the value of life.
You're quite sure about that, squadron leader? This is important.
So's my life. To me, anyway. And the lives of these jokers here. And the 18 men we lost tonight.
The opening sees Mallory's commanding officer reflect on his choice to send a group of people on a suicide mission like this. Ultimately, he laments that they have no choice, but it's the hope and possibility of success that they live for. He's not invested in their humanity because he's become so dehumanized by the cycle of war he's stuck in. Stanley Baker's character has a similar experience.
I'm tired and I'm fed up. I've been fighting this war a long time. I've been killing Germans since 1937. There's no end to them. You shoot a man at 200 yards, he's just a moving target. You kill him with a knife. You're close enough to smell him. I smell them in my sleep.
Mallory encourages him to do his job, but before that, we see him talk to Franklin, saying that the only way to win a war is to be just as nasty as the enemy, and what scares him is waking up to find out he's worse. Mallory's plan by the finale of the film is reflective of just what war does to a person's perspective. Major Franklin is injured early on in the film, and on a cliff, the team considers what to do with him. They're given 3 options: leave him so the Germans can take him to a hospital but can divulge their plan, take him knowing that he'll die without medical assistance, or kill him. Mallory decides to take him, and then later in the film he leaves him in a captured German base. Before they even came to this choice, Mallory gave Franklin false information about the nature of the mission. By the end of the film, the Germans treat his wounds, but he gives up their secrets because of truth serum. These were the false plans Mallory planted, and so the team is able to proceed with their original plan to blow up the guns at the expense of Major Franklin. Mallory took a person he knew and turned him into a tool for the greater good, but what kind of good can you truly achieve if this is the cost?
Do you know what you've done? You've used up an important human being. Oh, I misjudged you. You're rather a ruthless character, Captain Mallory.
Well, I didn't think of it back on the cliff. But if I had, I'd have done exactly the same thing. It's the only chance we've got to get the job done.
Well, right now I say the hell with the job. I've been on 100 jobs and not one of them's altered the course of the war. There've been 1,000 wars and there'll be 1,000 more until we all kill each other off completely. I don't care about the war anymore. I care about Roy.
And if Turkey comes into the war on the wrong side?
So what? Let the whole bloody world come in and blow itself to pieces. That's what it deserves.
And what about the 2,000 men on Keros?
I don't know the men on Keros, but I do know the men on Navarone.
This calculated choice is something that returns later. When Miller discovers his bombs have been sabotaged, the team is able to figure out Anna, a resistance fighter they met along the way, is working for the Nazis after she was captured by them before the events of the film. Miller tells Mallory he once again has 3 choices: leave her for the Germans to find and use, take her at the risk of further sabotage, or kill her. Before Mallory can truly decide, Maria, another resistance fighter, kills her. Mallory's arc comes down to the idea of truly doing what's necessary. While he's in command, he can give orders to kill Nazis, but how different is it when you're the one doing the killing? Miller wants him to feel what he turns his subordinates into by being part of this system of war, but the choice is taken away from him when Maria kills her. This becomes the biggest problem with the film. Up to this point, there was a strong forward momentum that allowed for these discussions of war and morality. Quiet moments where the team reflected on what they've become for the sake of a larger political system that they have no real say in. By removing the choice from Mallory's hands and having Maria be corrupted enough to kill in cold blood like that, we open ourselves even further to the idea that every victory in a war is still a loss. The problem is that after this point, the film simply has the team go about their mission and end on a more triumphant note where the surviving members of the team celebrate their win over the Nazi superguns. The anti-war themes never get a proper conclusion. Perhaps the idea is that the moment of battle takes priority over the moral reflection, that these men would later regret their part in the war but are momentarily caught up with the thrill of success. However, the film never makes this clear, and it plays more like an extremely progressive anti-war film that has to justify its runtime with a spectacular final action scene instead of a cap-off to its social commentary. With that main criticism out of the way, there's one last idea I want to discuss: the value of luck. The film opens with Mallory being told that the most thorough and precise plans in the world don't matter without luck. Regardless of the credentials a person may hold, the biggest question to ask is if they're lucky. This idea helps justify the tone against Gregory Peck's initial criticism. This is a heightened world to a degree. It's making these characters exaggerations that play a bigger part in theme than they do as relatable human beings. The factor of luck is something else that helps connect the soldiers to the Greek setting and that established tone. Throughout the film, there are moments where the team just gets lucky. Climbing the mountain in the middle of the night as quickly as they do is already a major contrivance that the film simply needs to keep going, but even before that, the team surviving the storm and shipwreck is another. By the end of the film, these characters are surviving by the skin of their teeth, and that adds to the deconstruction of the human in war. Luck is the ultimate thing that cannot be accounted for. As horrible as the things these people do are, as bad as they feel, as bleak as the future is, there's always a chance that things can be better. The ending, while problematic from the anti-war standpoint, symbolizes this by giving Stavros someone else to love, a person he would never have met if he didn't agree to come on this mission. By the end of any battle, there's time for reflection, and while the cycle of war continues, the human factor and its unpredictability are what keep us grounded. The Guns of Navarone truly is a classic. While the ending might be slightly too cheerful, there are elements there that are consistent with the overall intent of the piece. This is a powerful anti-war film, and one of the best examples of what an epic film can be. The cast is incredible, disappearing into their roles and giving very nuanced performances that perfectly transition from sorrow to rage to joy. As a precursor to more typical spy films, the ideas in place here about the human factor, endless cycle of violence, and personal suffering of the soldier will become important later. I'm giving The Guns of Navarone a 4 out of 4.